Welcome to the Yoga and podcast. I'm your host, Ashley, a yoga teacher and embodiment teacher here in Austin, Texas. I am curious about all things yoga and today we will explore the subject of yoga and fear. I'm especially excited and so grateful to have Gioconda Parker on this episode. She is an amazing yoga teacher and one of my friends who has a depth of knowledge about all things yoga. We will be discussing all about yoga and fear, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode, y'all. All right, joining us on today's episode is yoga teacher for over 2 decades, somatic experiencing practitioner, and teacher of other yoga teachers and world traveler, Gioconda Parker. Welcome.
Hi, Ashley. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. And I asked a little bit earlier how you were doing, but for the podcast, for the sake of the listeners, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Got home from India 6 days ago. And so I've sort of been in the traveling mayhem, trying to, make it back and hunker down, but super grateful to have, gotten on a flight and gotten home and gotten settled in. So
yeah,
I'm on a 14-day self-quarantine just to be sure that, that things are safe for me and everybody else. And so that's requiring all of my good yoga practice put in place.
Yes. Is this is day 1 of 14 or?
No, I'm on day 5.
Day 5. Okay.
Yeah.
How's it been going?
Well, a lot of the times it's great. I actually read a book cover to cover. It's been probably a few years since I've read a novel, just a novel. And for the most part, it's good. And then every once in a while, I listen to something on the news or I have a conversation with somebody and I can just, watch my anxiousness climb and then, have to use everything that I know, all my resources to sort of, steady, take a deep breath and be like, we don't know everything that's going to happen, but can just stay present as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very true. So today's topic, and you had a wonderful idea to bring up about fear. Yoga and fear is today's episode, and boy, what a thing to unpack at this this time in the world. Where do we start with that? How do we even? How would you begin that journey, Gioconda, of talking about yoga and fear?
Well, I would say, I've been thinking about this quite a bit, and in the Yoga Sutras, there's a place that this is referenced, and basically there's a sutra that refers to what's called the kleshas, and the kleshas are considered to be like the coverings over, like a veil that covers over kind of our true self, our essential core being. And these kleshas are listed, there's 5 of them. And the first one is called avidya. And so avidya is considered to be false knowledge. And so to sort of just make a distinction between that and not knowing, when we're in a state of avidya, it's not that we don't know, it's that what we think we know is incorrect, but we don't even know to question it. So it's like we're believing something to be true that is not true, but we don't even know to question whether or not it's true. So we're just operating under a false assumption. And, one of my teachers, TKV Desikachar, when he writes about it, he says it's one state removed from ignorance, because when we're in ignorance, we just don't know. But when avidya takes hold, we're absolutely convinced of something that is not accurate, and we don't even know to question it. And to me, one of the things that's so great about having the Yoga Sutras and being able to reference them is, even though they were, sort of compiled and written down a long time ago, like, being human is still being human. And
Yeah.
right. And so we can all think of times when we were absolutely convinced of something, and it later came to light that the thing we were absolutely convinced of was not true and not accurate, or not the full perspective on the situation and what was going on. When you sort of continue and to read and sort of study what comes next, there are it says Avidya is the parent, and there are 4 children. And the first children is asmita, which is basically like ego. And if you want to like boil that down for me these days, the way I'm looking at that is just this belief that I'm separate, that I'm alone. And it's kind of easier to feel separate because we literally are, sheltering in place. And so even being, physically distant from other people can start to feel like we have to face this challenge alone. And that sense of separateness then tends to sort of spin into like, my problems are bigger than anyone else's, or different than everyone else's, or there's no one who really understands me or gets me. And so that's kind of like the first struggle. And then we have the next 2 that are kind of like a pair of opposites, which is attachment, and I'm just watching that every day as like things that I had on my calendar that were planned, they're either happening virtually versus being together in person, or they're just, they're getting moved or canceled. And, that initial moment of like, no,
Yeah.
I can just feel that clenching, and literally like the physical experience of wanting something to stay the way that it is, and just having to soften, and let it go. And then the flip side of that, which is aversion, like the things that we don't want to happen. And, I'm sure we can all relate to that right now of like, no, like that would be the worst possible thing that could happen, like, oh, this is going to last for a week. Oh no, this is going to last for a few weeks. Oh, wow. We really don't know how long it's going to last. And, that push, trying to make it not be as it is. The aversion. And then the last one is fear, right? The last of the children is fear. And I always take comfort in the fact that the Yoga Sutra says that even the enlightened beings, even the sages, as long as they are, here in human form, are going to experience fear. And so
that makes me feel better.
Yeah.
Strangely enough. Yeah. Like, okay, like we're all in this together. We're all in the trenches.
Exactly. I mean, and that's huge. It's huge to realize, like I just find that one of the most, how do I say it? Just like one of my favorite things about the yoga practice, is that there's room for everything. So, it's like I can be on my mat in a physical asana practice and be like super annoyed about warrior 2, or chair pose. Like those 2 get me every time. I'm in the pose, doing the thing. Teacher's like, breathe and relax. And I'm like, you breathe and relax. I don't want to be here right now,
Yeah.
And
I've experienced that. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And yet there's something about the years of having done that, just being like, okay, and now I'm observing my aversion to this pose. And I'm actually okay, and I can breathe, and I can be here, and I can go one layer deeper and realize like I'm really okay. Or sometimes I can say, you know what, I need to come out of this for a breath and then go back. it's like it, when it comes, and so that's what I've been sort of doing lately, and my approaching, fear from this perspective of yoga, of saying, oh yeah, a moment just happened, a conversation I just had really sparked something in me. I feel it physically because I feel clenched inside.
Mm-hmm.
Let me slow down for a minute and breathe and be with this. And even sometimes I need to like take a pen and write it down. What are all the things that are spinning in my head right now? Mm-hmm. Or just pause and go, what exactly was it about that conversation that got this going? Right?
I've noticed that a lot. I'll have a really good moment, or a really good like couple hours or half of a day, and then I'll have a conversation with someone and it'll trigger me about this pandemic, what's going on, and I have to really think about why am I freaking out now after talking to this person, and then I calm down. But it's interesting like how conversations have been sparking me a lot lately too, with people, because everyone has different opinions. Anyway, it makes me feel better to know that you also understand that.
Right. I mean, well, that's just it. It's like we all do. And,
Mm-hmm.
the thing is, we all respond differently to fear when it comes up. And,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of that is related to sort of like our historical responses, to fear, and sort of how, how we were raised to respond, and what are our sort of natural survival mechanisms. And basically from like this nervous system perspective, we know that when we're in that like deeply triggered layer, we have fight, flight, or freeze.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's the physical way that comes up, which is like those of us who have the fight response, we're gonna clench our jaws, we're gonna clench our fists, we're gonna tighten up our muscles, in our upper body, and we're going to hold a lot of muscular tension, and that's that fight response. And and that may come out as an argument, that's kind of like the fight response. Or we have the flight response, like I'm going to run away, I'm going to avoid and leave this conversation, I'm going to, and the flight response a lot of times will be an increased heart rate and all the things it would take to run,
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the freeze response, which is, we just kind of like just shut down,
Yeah.
and so, and knowing like what our response is, feeling it arise and making space for it, and then it's like and then figure out what kind of practice we need in that moment. And, maybe you have time to like throw down a mat and do like a full yoga practice. A lot of times you can't do that right in the middle of where you are, but it's like, okay, what do I need to do? Do I need to take a deep breath? Do I need to look around and see that everything's okay? Do I need to go outside? Do I need to pause the conversation? And I think too, like if we can start practicing with each other that yoga of in the moment, being able to say, whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah.
I'm getting a little triggered by like the conversation that we're having. Can we both pause for a moment and take a breath and just see like what's the trajectory and the direction that we're going? And that's not always easy to do.
No, that's a beautiful way to state it, which I wouldn't have thought of. So yeah, I will use that next time.
Oh, good. Yeah, me too.
I will try. It might feel really awkward.
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't mean that it's not, there's there's the one side of sort of what can happen with those of us who are, pursuing these practices of being more conscious and more aware. Sometimes we want to sort of flee into that in the sense of like, well, in the long run, everything will be okay. And we all just know, that everything's going to be okay. And this term spiritual bypass we used to talk about.
Oh my God, yes. That's what's been triggering me lately, actually.
Well, that's good to know. I mean, to notice that, because the thing is, like, there's not wisdom in that. We do need to pay attention to what's happening right now. We do need to take responsible action for ourselves and for the people around us. I mean, even if you believe that because you are vibrating at a higher level, you're not going to get sick, that's great. But what about the people around you who maybe aren't vibrating at the level that you think that you're at? Like we have a level of responsibility to not just make choices for ourselves, but to make choices that take into account all living beings. I mean,
Yeah.
like,
Be responsible, take ownership. Yeah, just because you're vibrating high doesn't mean you're being responsible. And yes, I completely agree with all that. That's
right.
beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. So be wise.
Be an adult.
Be an adult. And at the same time, I mean, part of a healthy immune system is to keep redirecting our attention towards things that calm us down. Keep redirecting our attention towards the things that help us to feel like joy in the midst of this challenge, and to, look at other humans with kindness rather than fear. Even if we are keeping our 6-foot distance, we can still wave. I mean, I went out this morning and, I saw my neighbor across the way, and we both kind of looked at each other and looked away, because it's like, whoa, how are we doing this? And then what was really great is her little girl was like, hi.
Oh.
And then I waved at her, and then her mom waved at me, and we sort of like we cracked that, the fear thing of like furtively looking away versus like, hey, I'm going to keep my distance. You're keeping your distance. But by the way, we're neighbors. And hi, hello, I acknowledge you. We're still in the same human race together. And
I think that's also, I mean, not necessarily these people, but in general, in a general thing, it's trust. It's trusting in humanity, trusting in the collective, trusting that someone isn't going to, try to come up and shake your hand. Not saying that these people were, but in general, I think it's a time for massive trust. And I think that's, it's, you could either, what is it, fear or love? And I also think trust and love are very intertwined right now in that way.
Yeah.
If I'm articulating that.
Yeah, it absolutely. I love the way you're saying that, because that's what it really comes down to, is also when we're in that like deep fear state, one of the things that helps us come out of it is social engagement. Like eye contact, a smile, the little girl waves. And then it just like, it broke the whole thing. And then everybody's like, all right, wait, we can still come out and wave at each other. And I love seeing this kind of natural resiliency that we've witnessed in like in France and in Italy, where people are like choosing to come out on their porches and wave.
That's beautiful.
And see each other,
Yeah.
And so I was recently listening to this podcast, and one of the things that just struck me was this. He was a scientist, actually. He was just talking about sort of like the realities of what we're facing, and the potential like overwhelm of of sort of medical system. And the interviewer asked him, like, "Do you have any hope?" And he paused, and I was like, "Yes, yeah." In my car, like, there's always hope. There's always hope,
Yeah.
And what he did say is, he said, in these times, we have the opportunity to like rise above what we ever thought we were capable of. Or we have the possibility of dropping far below what we ever expected of ourselves. And he said, my greatest hope is that we all rise. And I was like, yes.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So beautiful to hear him say that, and to be like, oh, this is it. And I feel like in some ways, like people keep asking, like, how are you doing? being at home, doing all these things. And like, I just feel like this is what we've been training for, you know?
That's exactly how I felt. I was like, I feel like for years I've been practicing to get to this point in my life where utilizing all the skills, all the resources from yoga. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love the thing you did. You posted it, somatic. I'm not well versed at the somatics, but you talked about resourcing, and I would love it if you wanted to share some of what you were talking about, because I thought it was really smart, really beautiful, really practical too, because it's intentional. But
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, so I'm a somatic experiencing practitioner, and that's a style of trauma therapy developed by Dr. Peter Levine. He's an amazing human. And you can look up, if y'all are interested, you can look up more information about this. But there are some really basic skills that that just help us. And the first one is resourcing. And so, you know, one of the things that we lose access to when we sort of get into a state of fear is we lose access to our resources. We literally just forget about all these things that can help us. And so there's this awesome exercise that I really love to do, resourcing. It's so simple. All you do is just take your hand and then trace your hand. And yes, if you did this in kindergarten, when you take your hand away, it'll look like a turkey. Like you guys are
Cute.
making the turkey. But literally, then what you do is you write down in each one of your fingers and your thumbs like resources, and you have internal resources and external resources. You know, so for me, just being outside, just seeing nature, any kind of nature. It can be a big, beautiful tree, an awesome mountain, the ocean, or just like a tiny little bird in the yard, like doing its thing. But that's always a resource for me. My person, you know, my best friend in the world. I don't even have to talk to her. All I have to do is think about the fact that she exists and loves me. And I'm like, okay, I'm safe. I've got my friend, you know, music, you know, whatever it is. But when we have these resources and then we can remember them, you know, the reason you use your hand is you can count them off. And you're like, okay, number one, can't do that one right now. Number two, okay, think about that. Number three,
Okay.
right? Number three,
Yeah.
oh yes, I can right now put down everything I'm doing and go outside, walk for 15 minutes, shift my state and come back. Because once we feel resourced, then we move from basically that lower part of our brain, right? We kind of move from the amygdala, which is the sort of fight, flight, or freeze. We move through the limbic brain, which is more of our emotional cycling and response. And eventually we get back up to our higher thinking brain. And that's where we have choices. That's where we have the capacity to get perspective on what's happening.
Have you been wanting to start a podcast but not sure where to begin? If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. I really love how easy it is to create. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. There's a creation tool that allows you to record and edit right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you to all the major platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Anchor is spelled ANCHOR.
The great thing about working with the somatic experiencing for all these years is there's basically just a few, and resourcing is the first one. The next one is called orienting, and the idea is literally, so animals, you know, when they come into a new space, you see the first thing they do is they look around, right? They kind of orient, and they do. So you can either so what we like to train ourselves to do is to orient for safety. So in other words, like taking a moment to look around your environment and notice, like, there's my front door. If I wanted to go out, it's right there, right?
Yeah.
There's windows, but then beyond that, like I orient to, like when I'm looking right here, I have this really awesome art piece. It's a female form of Ganesh, which I just discovered that there was even a female form of Ganesh.
I love that. I had no idea.
Yeah. And so if I let my attention rest on it for a moment and literally start to notice like the colors, it's a vibrant painting. So like the orange skin, there's like blue sky, the little mouse is yellow and adorable. Right? As I'm doing that, what I'm literally doing is I'm orienting to something other than my internal felt experience. So it's good to be able to feel what's going on inside with ourselves, but it needs to be balanced with being aware of what's going on outside of ourselves. Yeah. And so to orient, first can just be to like look around and take in like the very basics of like, that's the exit door, those are the windows, that's the ceiling, this is the floor. But, you know, if you take it a little further and you choose an item and literally describe it in detail, either out loud or to yourself, the process of doing that, right, shifts and pulls our attention outward so that then we have a bigger container. Because this is the thing, is any experience that comes, as long as we can contain it, we can work with it. It's when it gets bigger than us that we feel overwhelmed. And so yeah, so one, that orienting is like to feel a bigger container and to recognize like everything around us as well as what's going on inside of us, you know. We can also use orienting to like feel our bones, feel our muscles, like, you know, like use your hands, feel your skin, like feel your skin boundary, feel your muscle boundary, and feel your bones. Because like emotions and sort of the activated state in our nervous system, that's in our viscera. So that's going to be in sort of like our core. And so, you know, if I can feel my shoulder blades, and if I can feel my backbone, and if I can feel my legs and what I'm sitting on, then all of a sudden I've got a container around what I'm feeling in my core. And once I have a container that's big enough, then I can process and work with what's happening inside. So orienting can be external or it can be internally, specifically orienting to things like muscles and bones because they're steady and stable. They help us feel contained. You know?
I love that. Yeah, and you're not leaving the body. You're not jumping out of your body.
No.
Yeah.
Not at all. Not at all. In fact, it's not that at all, but you are putting yourself in the greater container that you're in. And the thing is that like 99.9% of the fear we experience is not a response to a direct stimulus. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like there's a story behind it. There's like this dialogue.
What might happen. Like that story can go on forever. But if I orient and I look around in my immediate space, nothing is happening, you know? And so we bring ourselves back to say, yes, it's possible. And there are things that are within my control that I can do to wisely prepare. And then beyond that, what I can also do is look around and say, sun's out. It's a beautiful day. I can either choose to recognize that it's a beautiful hump day, Wednesday.
You know, it is.
Or I can go into the what if and really miss the entire day. So orienting is, you know, I mean, we have the sort of, you know, the language that says, you know, be present, but it's a skill to help us be present, you know? So, and then, you know, another one of the skills that we work with is it's called pendulation. And these are all just words that help us describe what we do naturally when we're feeling grounded and present and steady. So pendulation, you might notice this happens naturally in a conversation. You start talking with somebody about what's going on, and then somehow the conversation will just naturally shift to something that's positive.
Oh, yeah.
Right? If you think about it, like, a lot of times, like if you have a friend and they're kind of going through something hard and you start talking about it, they talk about it for a little while. And then there's just this moment where it sort of turns and the conversation turns to, oh yeah, but that vacation last month was really amazing, you know? And so pendulation is just to shift, to recognize like that's enough of that kind of activation, and it's time to like now shift to something else. And in particular, I think this is really important with like taking in sort of news media, like,
oh yeah,
okay,
yes.
I do want to be informed, I do want to know what's happening, I want to choose my source of that wisely, and then I want to recognize when it's time to pendulate. So in other words, now it's time for me to walk away from that and do whatever other activity is there that's possible. There's only so much we can take in, and so titration is the other skill we talk about. So titration is taking in enough information, and it's the same thing like doing enough of a yoga practice where we feel the energy shift, not practicing obsessively to the point where we're fatigued and we can't do the rest of the things throughout the day. Taking in enough interaction with other people, those of us that are like taking lots of phone calls and helping people calm down and be steady, like you have to titrate that with, then, I have to say, no, that's enough. And I need to put the phone down and I need to chant for a little while. Sometimes it's mantra and sometimes it's Kenny Rogers.
I love it.
It's just like whatever it is, every once in a while it's a little Nine Inch Nails because sometimes you just get the edge off.
Oh yeah, you do. You have to take that edge off. So
Yeah.
titration is the practice of refilling your cup or more balancing what you're doing, like the output versus input. Is that how you would?
Yeah, okay. No, so glad you asked because like those kind of got merged together. So titration is only taking in as much stimulation as is necessary in order like to get the energy going or to get the energy moving. And then pendulation would be, now I'm going to move into towards one of my resources, like, okay, I hung in there. And I am taking in enough information to be informed, and I'm making good plans for myself, and I'm, getting the supplies that I need. I'm doing those things. And now that's enough energy in that direction. And you can kind of feel when you're at your edge, you're like, okay, that's enough for today. And now I'm going to pendulate. I'm going to deliberately shift my energy towards a book, towards a happy hour, virtual FaceTime or tea or whatever it is.
Any self-keeping practice that feels nourishing.
Taking the dog for a walk, or petting your cat if you have one, spending time with your loved ones. But that's also probably something that has to be titrated too for people who are in the house.
Stuck with
other people a lot, is to recognize like even with somebody that you dearly love, it can be helpful to be like, okay, quiet time now.
Yeah, my cats are really tired of me. I'm happy, but they're over it. They're like, why don't you? I think because I recently got a job, they're very happy that I'm gone and they get to miss me now. So cats have attitudes. That's how they all are. But
I saw the funniest meme where like a cat was like, oh, what are you doing in my space all the time?
They like, no cat was expecting all this attention, and now that all cats have all this attention, and they don't know what to do. Well, okay, fear. Is there anything I haven't asked you about yoga and fear that you would like me to ask you?
Hmm. Let me think. Well, I would say this. I mean, what fear does physiologically for us, you know,
Mm.
is like it basically it gets us ready to respond. And so the physiology of that is that like our vision narrows, like literally we lose the peripheral vision because we're hyper focused on something. We, you know, our the digestion, all of that sort of goes offline because we're directly focused on taking action. Muscular rigidity, you know,
Mhm.
the muscular system gets tight, our jaw gets tight, and that kind of comes all the way back to sort of the animal response of growling. So if you think about it, it's like, you know, it's
Yeah.
all of that, all those things that happen. And so it does take a toll on our organ systems because they basically like shut down and shift into, you know, adrenals are heightened, all those things. And so specifically when we look at the practice of yoga, and looking at fear, you know, if we're in a heightened state of rigidity, we probably need to do a more active style of practice first.
To
Um,
move that stress out, that flight or fight, that wanting to run, like just
right,
get it out.
right. Yeah. You know, and there are studies that have shown that if somebody is feeling really anxious, telling them to calm down does not help.
No.
You know, it doesn't. So similarly, while like some folks might be like, oh, it's a good time for a restorative practice, it's like, well, yes, but not if you're overstimulated and
Mhm.
overactivated, and in fact trying to go to stillness too quickly without doing something to move the energy, it, you know, could be sort of counter effective. So, so I think now is a really good time to be, you know, it doesn't mean that everybody needs to be out there doing like hardcore power yoga. If that's your jam, then great. But you know, some of the more like standing poses are amazing right now. Uh, Literally, you know, just basic sun salutations or moon salutations, because that's like getting your heart, your breath to move. And since
Mm.
the heart rate's heightened anyway, actually doing physical movement that will catch up with that will then help you sort of get rid of that extra activation in the nervous system. And then standing poses, they make us feel stable and steady and strong. And when we engage our muscles and literally like lock out the joints, and of course I don't mean like hyperextend your legs in standing poses, but I'm just saying, you
Mhm.
know, like the hard work of doing the physical practice of some good standing poses and down dog and, you know, simple things like that, like that is one of the orienting things. Like we're then reorienting to muscles and bones and shifting our attention from the viscera, so again moving into the feeling strong and safe and steady in our bodies. And so I'm a big fan. I love restorative yoga and I love yin yoga, but I have been
Mhm.
noticing that what feels really good to me is to do rigorous practice first and then take that time to be steady and still.
Well, that, I mean, that makes total sense to me because when you mentioned the breathing, like simple sun salutations to get the breath moving, for myself, I notice just stop breathing. And when I'm scared, I just am like,
Yeah.
or I'm really like you're talking about the tunnel vision and focusing and all that. I'm like, that is me with the not breathing. And it makes sense, like to move fear, you want to then obviously breathe, or stress, you just want to breathe.
Hmm.
And yeah, and quite frankly, of course, I also love restorative and yin as well, but I also notice shallow breathing all the time when I do that. When I practice, when I teach it, I notice the shallow breathing. And I mean, I like what you're saying. It's both. It's not just do one only right now. Do the thing that you need the most. But yeah, I've noticed that lately is like the lack of breath. I feel like Mother Nature gets to breathe, but everyone else is like holding their breath right now. Oh, what's gonna happen?
Yeah.
So yeah. Oh, well, thank you, Gia. This has been really fun to have you, and I haven't talked to you in a really long time, I realized, and I miss talking to you.
Yeah, it's great to hear your voice, and thanks so much for doing this, putting
Yeah.
more good information and positive vibes out into the world. I really appreciate you.
Yeah. Where can we find you on
So I'm
the
on,
internet?
yeah, on the internet. I'm online. It's GIOCONDAYOGA.com, GiocondaYoga.com. And I'm also on Instagram at Gioconda Yoga, and I'm on Facebook, same at Gioconda Yoga. You can.
And all this will be in the show notes, so you can check it out through the show notes. Great. Well, thanks for coming on the show, and I'd love to have you back again. So
Sounds good, Ashley. So good to see you.
So good to see you too. That's all I have for today's episode about yoga and fear with the beautiful, awesome Gioconda Parker. If you liked what you heard, please share this episode or others with your friends. I would love to have Gia back on the podcast again, as we have many more topics for discussion. If you would like to help the podcast, please leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcast. If you're looking for a free online yoga class, check out my YouTube channel, Ashley Weber Yoga, or my website, Ashley Weber Yoga. And the links are in the show notes. If you want to connect with the podcast directly, you can email us at yogaandpodcast@gmail.com. The and is spelled out, YOGAAND podcast@gmail. If you want to follow us on Instagram, it's Yoga and Podcast. Please let me know if you have any specific topics for shows in the future. See you next week.